47 men walked into Korvath Base on the night of March the 4th, 1961. Not one of them walked out. No bodies were recovered. No distress signals were sent. No alarms were triggered. The base's own internal logs recorded nothing unusual until 4:17 in the morning, when every single entry stopped, mid-sentence, at the exact same moment. Korvath Military Installation sat at the edge of the Karelian highlands, 230 kilometers from the nearest civilian settlement. It had been operational for 11 years. It housed communications equipment, a rotating garrison, and a research division whose exact function was never publicly disclosed. The soldiers stationed there were not green recruits. They were experienced men. Men who had seen difficult postings and come back steady. On the morning of March the 5th, a supply courier arrived at the outer gate and found it open. Not broken, not forced, open, as though someone had simply left and not bothered to close it behind them. The courier's name was Alexander Brath. He was 26 years old. He had made the Corvath supply run 14 times before. He knew every face at that base. When he stepped through the outer gate and called out and heard nothing answer, no voice, no footstep, no radio crackle, he later said he stood completely still for almost 4 minutes. He could not explain why. He said the silence felt deliberate, as though whatever had taken them was still deciding whether to take him too. Alexander Brath did not enter the base. He returned to his vehicle and drove without stopping until he reached the regional command post at Edvar Station, 140 kilometers south. He reported what he had found. He was debriefed for 9 hours. He would never make the Corvath run again. The man assigned to lead the initial investigation was Colonel Petrov Galich, a 20-year veteran of military operations and one of the few officers with existing clearance to access Corvath's classified research wing. Galich arrived at the base with a team of 12 men on the evening of March the 5th. He was methodical. He was skeptical by training and disposition. He had investigated disappearances before, soldiers who had gone absent without leave, men who had broken under pressure and run. He told his team to expect a rational explanation. He told them they would likely find the garrison sheltering somewhere nearby, confused, disoriented, but alive. They found the mess hall tables still set for breakfast. The food had not been touched. Steam was no longer rising from anything, but the plates were full and undisturbed. Every bunk in the barracks had been slept in. Personal effects, photographs, letters, small objects men carry, were all exactly where they had been left. No one had packed. No one had prepared to go anywhere. In the communications room, every radio was operational. Every handset was in its cradle. The last transmission logged was a routine status confirmation at 2:51 in the morning. After that, nothing. The equipment had not been damaged. The power had not cut out. The men had simply stopped using it. Galich ordered a perimeter sweep. His team walked the full boundary of the installation in both directions. The outer fence was intact. The watchtower at the northern post still had a mug of cold tea sitting on the rail. Whoever had been in that tower had left the tea and simply stepped away. One of Galich's team, a signals officer named Dmitry Solak, noticed something on the 3rd hour of the sweep. The snow around the base had not been disturbed. Not outward, not toward the tree line, not in any direction. 47 men should have left tracks. Even in the dark, in confusion, in panic, men moving through heavy snow leave evidence. There was nothing. The snow around Korvath Base on the morning of March the 5th was undisturbed, as though no one had left at all. Solak documented this in his field report. He noted the radius of the undisturbed snow. He noted that the perimeter fence showed no compression marks, no climbing evidence, no disturbance of any kind at any point. He wrote, and this line was later removed from the official report, though a carbon copy survived, that the absence of any exit pattern suggested the men had not left through the perimeter at all. Galich was briefed on Solak's finding at approximately 3 in the morning of March the 6th. He ordered the written documentation sealed and removed from the active investigation file. Solak would later say, in a private letter to his brother, discovered years after his death, that Galich had not seemed surprised. That the colonel's face, when he heard about the snow, had gone very still in a way that was not the stillness of shock. It was the stillness of a man hearing something he had already considered. There was a third man who matters here. His name was Benedict Hauer. He had been stationed at Korvath Base for 8 months before the disappearance. Working in the research division under protocols he was not permitted to discuss outside the facility. Hauer had been granted emergency medical leave 3 days before the event. A routine cardiac evaluation that his commanding officer had approved without hesitation. He left the base on March the 1st. He was the only member of the permanent garrison who was not present on the night of March the 4th. When investigators came to speak with him, he was cooperative and calm. He answered every question within the boundary of his clearance. When asked whether he knew of any reason 47 men might have left the base voluntarily and without any trace, he said, and this was recorded verbatim, "The base was doing what it was always going to do eventually. I just didn't expect it to happen so soon." The investigator who recorded that statement filed it as a standard response under stress. It was not flagged for follow-up. Benedict Hauer requested a permanent reassignment the following week. It was granted immediately, without review. One local figure entered the investigation from the civilian side, a forest warden named Oscar Tren, who patrolled the highland region surrounding the base as part of his annual survey rotation. Tren had been working the northern grid on the night of March the 4th. He had no sightline to the base itself, but he was within 4 kilometers of its boundary. He was not contacted by military investigators. He came forward on his own, 3 weeks after the event, after hearing fragments of the story from a regional newspaper report that had been quickly suppressed. Tren told investigators that at approximately 3:40 in the morning on March the 5th, 40 minutes after the base logs cut off, he had seen a light. Not electric light. Not the glow of the base's exterior lamps, which he knew well. Something else. He described it as a vertical brightness, narrow, very tall, very still, positioned roughly in the direction of the installation. It had lasted less than 90 seconds, then the highland went dark again. He said the animals in that section of the forest had gone completely quiet before the light appeared. He said they did not resume their normal sounds until the following morning. His statement was logged. His name does not appear in the official summary report. When a journalist attempted to locate Oscar Tren in 1978 to follow up on the case, she was told by regional authorities that no record of a forest warden by that name existed for that district. The journalist who attempted to locate Tren was Fen Kasper, a correspondent for an independent press outlet in the capital. Kasper had spent 4 years reconstructing the Korvath timeline from secondary sources, surviving field notes, carbon copies of sealed reports, and private correspondence obtained through individuals who had agreed to speak without attribution. Kasper was preparing a long-form investigation for publication in the spring of 1979. It was never published. Kasper died in February of that year. The cause was listed as cardiac arrest. He was 34 years old and had no documented history of cardiac illness. His notes, files, and drafts were not found among his personal effects. His editor was told by 2 men, who identified themselves as administrative officials but showed no formal identification, that the material had been claimed by a relevant government body under national security provisions. The editor's name has been withheld by request. One anonymous source, a former administrative officer who served in the regional command structure during the original investigation, spoke to a private researcher in 2003. The researcher has not published this account but shared it under strict conditions for historical documentation. The officer said, and I quote, "We were told from the beginning that there was an answer and that the answer was classified. What no one told us was that the people who classified it did not actually know what the answer was. They were just afraid of the question." The official position of the relevant military authority, as it stands today, is that the events of March the 4th to 5th, 1961, at Korvath installation involved the controlled withdrawal of personnel under operational security conditions, and that all individuals were accounted for within the appropriate administrative framework. No names are attached to this statement. No documentation supports it. No family of the 47 missing men ever received a formal notification of any kind. No death certificate, no discharge record, no letter of any sort. Some families were simply told their relative had been reassigned to a posting that could not be disclosed. Several families waited decades for letters that never arrived. The last known attempt to legally compel disclosure came in 1994, when 4 relatives of men stationed at Corvath filed a petition for access to the original investigation documents. The petition was accepted, reviewed, and returned with a single notation. The documents they had requested did not exist. Colonel Petrov Galish retired from service in 1968. He lived quietly in a regional town in the east of the country. He gave no interviews. He wrote no memoirs. He died in 1989 of natural causes. A researcher who tracked down his surviving family in 2011 was told by his son that in the last years of his life, Galich had refused to sleep with the lights off, that he had not been willing to discuss why, that toward the end he had said one thing to his son, just once, without elaboration, that he had been to a place where something had made a decision, and that the worst part was that the decision had not seemed to include any anger. Dmitry Solak never discussed the Korvath investigation publicly. He left military service in 1966 and spent the remainder of his working life as a land surveyor in the south. The carbon copy of his original field report, the one that documented the undisturbed snow, was found among his personal papers after his death in 2007. His family did not know what it referred to. They handed it to a regional archive, where it sat uncatalogued for 9 years before a researcher identified it. That document is the only surviving primary source record of the original sweep. Benedict Hauer's subsequent posting was classified. His name does not reappear in any publicly available service record after March of 1961. An inquiry submitted to the relevant archive in 2016 produced a response confirming that his personnel file existed, but was held under a permanent access restriction with no scheduled review date. 47 men. One night. No tracks in the snow, no signal, no word. Oscar Trend described a vertical light that lasted less than 90 seconds. He said the forest went quiet before it appeared. In 2019, a survey team conducting a geological assessment of the highland region filed a routine report on an anomalous formation discovered near the former boundary of Corvath installation. The formation was described as a section of ground, approximately 30 meters across, where the soil compaction pattern was inconsistent with any natural geological process the team could identify. The report recommended further analysis. No follow-up survey has been conducted. The formation is still there.